Hi, guys. Welcome again to another episode of Sexpression. We have somebody really amazing today. Her name is Kushe, and she's going to tell us about what fascinating life she runs and what all she does in her life. Kushe, over to you.
Sure. I'm Cliche, and I basically have recently deconverted. And so I started a blog, and it's called Not This Black Girl. And the reason I did that is because I actually grew up in a um, not a very mixed culture. So I don't have a lot of the same experiences as other people who are Black. So I get a lot of assumptions, but I wanted to really just say how people are different and you can't judge them by how they look. So today we're going to talk more about polyamory and how that's a part of my lifestyle. And yeah, that will be what we're doing.
Kushe, if I may, I know nothing about polyamory. So it would be really great if you can start from basics because if I'm just talking about myself, the entire knowledge that I have comes from Google search, which
Okay.
I think is little shaded. So, why don't
Okay.
you start from the basics for at least for me?
Sure. And I'll start with basics. And if you have questions, definitely let me know.
Yeah.
Well, the first time I heard about polyamory, I was like wet behind the ears. I was a graduate student about 10 years ago. And one of the other students, like I drove her home and she's like, well, I'm polyamorous. And of course, I'm like, what does that even mean? And so that was 10 years ago. I didn't really dive into it. And fast forward, I've been married for 5 years, and I just have I'm a very big person, big personality. I love people. And so I wanted to just kind of explore things outside of our marriage, but on a very intimate level. And so polyamory, basically break it down, poly, many, and then amory, love. So it just means you have the capacity or the desire to love more than one person is essentially what it means.
But then, how did you I think you need a lot of guts, especially because, from the time we are born, we've been told that monogamy is the way to look out for in life. Then, like how does it happen? All of a sudden, you
Absolutely.
realize, like,
That's so funny because for me, I've always kind of been drawn to monogamy, that idea that you have one person, you must find them. And, how much pressure is that to find one person? And then also for me, over my lifetime looking back, I I would develop deep connections and then may have an interest in someone else. And you can't just pursue that person. So I would then break up with my current person to pursue that, or I just wouldn't pursue any other interests. At the time, I had no idea there was a thing called polyamory or that was something that happened. But this particular time, my husband and I actually we had just gone through a lot in our relationship, and we were just kind of wanting a lot more things. My husband was actually very monogamous, and I'm his only partner. But for me, I just I needed more than just the one relationship I had, and I had a desire for that. But I didn't want that to cheapen the relationship I had with my husband. So I actually was in Starbucks one time and talking randomly with a girl, and we decided to go out and have coffee. And at this point, we were just going to be friends. And at the end of the coffee time, she said, "I just want to let you know I'm polyamorous." I'm like, "What does that have to do with this conversation?" Anyways, from that, she kind of started, I guess, taking me under her wing and telling me a little bit more about this lifestyle, which in my head, I couldn't comprehend having the capacity to love two people or more deeply. And so kind of that was just my intro to research in polyamory. It's just kind of talking to people who were in the lifestyle, her, another guy that I became really good friends with, and just joining communities like that.
yeah. So it was a long journey. It was not something that just happened after like 2 weeks or 3 weeks of knowing about polyamory, or was it like how did you just accept it that you would like to be a part of the polyamory environment, if that's the right way of putting it?
Absolutely. It was about a 9 month from like introducing the topic to my husband to where we were like, we felt confident in where our relationship was to actually explore this, because there are hiccups along the way. I mean, you have an established relationship, and then you're basically expanding that to other people. So there's time management, there's communication, things that come up. And so I mentioned it about, I guess, 9 months before we actually decided to try this. And he said, "That sounds really complicated. I'm not interested in that." And so I kind of just said, okay. And, over time, I researched it more myself and talked to people, and then I brought it up to him again much later. And at that point, I think his only question was, is that going to affect our relationship or our connection? I'm completely new to it as a teen, but I had some people who had been into it, and they had had a lot of mishaps on their journey. So thankfully, they helped me to not have those.
Yeah.
So basically, we did it very slowly, and we did it very thought out. We did a lot of time breaks and kind of just started to examine how that would affect us, because you can't possibly know, on the front end.
And were you aware that there would be jealousy involved? Like, what if you're like, I would always think that my boyfriend would be super jealous if I'm with some other guy.
Absolutely. The interesting thing is my husband's super easygoing. So initially, like, he didn't experience jealousy how I would have thought. And, from like our culture, it's like jealousy is a sign of love. So if you're jealous, it's like, oh, that's your person. You love them. And so when he didn't have a lot of jealousy, I'm like, do you not even like me? Do you not feel attracted to me? And he's like, what are you talking about? So for him, it was never a jealousy as in like, I don't like you with other people. It was a jealousy in that I'm fearful that our relationship will not be what it is now. And that's something that we had to work through.
Yeah. And how long have you been polyamorous for?
Actively, I'd say about 11 months or so is when we've kind of started that journey.
So have you told your kids about it?
My kids are super little. So they're 3 and like almost 2. So they've met my other partner, or the little one has met my other partner. And we kind of just have decided that we would allow them to call him whatever they choose to. Uh-huh. But we just do age appropriate information and disclosure to our children. And we'll just do that as they grow up.
Yeah. I think you still have like at least 2 to 3 years more to tell them.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it? Are you looking forward to those 2-3 years when you have to sit with them?
I think it'll probably be a lot easier than if they were older and I started the lifestyle, because then that's kind of all they would have, been around. So I think it'll be pretty seamless for us. I'm an over communicator. I'm a counselor, so I can just over communicate things. So I think it'll be okay.
Do you ever think that this is just a phase?
This is a really interesting question that I ask my poly people, because the thing with my relationships is, obviously I've been married for Robert for 5 years, and Mark I knew like 10 years ago, and we had a pretty significant connection. So there are 2 people that I had very significant connections with. And I am very demisexual. So I need a deep emotional connection before I form romantic attachments. So for me, even when I was dating people throughout this time period, it was hard to get that deep connection. And I didn't feel like, I don't know, it didn't feel right. So I always say that I don't know if one of them, if we were to break up, if I would be like, let me go find someone else, because it's just right now, it's really good for us, So I don't think it's a phase, if that's what you mean, but I think I can be monogamous or polyamorous in a pretty seamless way.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a very stupid question.
Sure.
Yeah, for me it is, because usually what happens is that if I've had a fight with my boyfriend, then I might send a message to another friend of mine who I think that there might be a connection, but obviously there's none right now. And the only thing is, because I've fought with my boyfriend. So at the end of the day, I'm not communicating with him,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm just taking the frustration somewhere else, and I'm just getting like, my needs being satisfied, which is just to talk. And then I come back and then we are happy again. So does that how polyamorous relationships also work? Or are these like 2 different relationships which are in silos and you have to give 100% concentration towards both?
Sure. Everyone does poly differently. So polyamory is actually under the umbrella of ethical non-monogamy, which is a lot of different things. But when it comes to poly, you have like kitchen table poly, which would be like we all kind of talk together, communicate together. We all know about each other and who they are, and have friendships as well. And then you have like parallel poly, where it would be like I have a relationship with this person, and they don't ever intersect. the way our specific, triad or V works is that we are like one unit, one family unit. We do bills together. We talk together. They have a friendship, and it's kind of, we operate as a unit. But like, if I were to probably date someone else, I'm pretty sure that they would probably be weird about me being like, oh, let's have someone else in our little polycule. Yeah. So it would be probably more parallel for us at this point. But it can go either way. A big thing in polyamory is just open communication, because you do have a lot of moving parts happening, and it just multiplies. So one thing someone told me when I first started was that when you have two people and you're in a relationship, you have a relationship with yourself and that person, and then you have a relationship together. Yeah. And you add one more person, it goes to 7 people. So imagine like 7 relationships that you have to maintain. So then you add another person, then you have all these relationships that you're maintaining. So it does like exponentially grow as you add people, if that makes sense. So yeah.
And how much would you communicate? Like, because like, like in a monogamous relationship, usually they say that the most important thing is that you communicate, you're open, you're honest about as much as possible. So out here, since you do not have just one person, but you have multiple people, what should be like the level of communication? Can you be honest? Can you just say, you know what, the other one is better in bed? Or you know what, he understands each other. Doesn't that just opens up like a strange kind of anonymous or something? Like how does it work?
So I'll share this with you. So I'm super open, and my husband is very like progressive, but my other partner is much older, and he's very like just very traditional. So even having one partner is really odd for him. So like, I'm extremely open with how I communicate. I try to frame it very well, but like there might be like, but we also, I tend to not talk about the other person with the other person if I haven't actually discussed that with the person I have an issue with, and they're really good about being like, you need to go back to that person and talk to that person about that, because that's something that y'all need to deal with. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just being mindful of feelings, being empathetic, and over communicating. Because if let's say Robert and I do something and I really like that, I might be like, oh, let's do this, Mark. Or like, for instance, I have a new person I'm talking to, and we're friends right now. He says I'm talking to him, whatever that means, but I'm interested in him romantically and vice versa. And so I will share things with him. And I think the hardest part is realizing that they are separate relationships. So if Mark says, don't say this, or you need to keep this private, I have to respect that, even though I tell my husband everything as well,
Okay, so let's do something like really funny, and I'm pretty sure during our other interactions, we're going to have so many things coming out. What are the major 3 myths related to polyamorous relationships which people have?
So there are a lot of them. The biggest one is it's about like the sex, or it's about you like you want to just have sex with other people, and that kind of goes along with cheating. So like, you're actually cheating. I think that's a big myth I get. So basically, polyamory is really about developing deep emotional connections with other people. If you were just to be about sex, that would actually be more swinging, not polyamory. And then cheating is a big one, because they think that because you have 2 people, you're cheating. And essentially, it's an agreement that you've made that allows every partner to consent and opt in. So it's something that's an understanding that everyone has, that y'all are going to be doing this and pursuing this. Let's see the other one I hear. I think the one I hear the most is you love one more than the other. Like, you have to love somebody more than the other, and that's like I think that one thing to consider is that when you have a lot of time invested in a relationship, you do tend to have deeper connections and entanglements with that person. And so sometimes people will never catch up, but I absolutely do not love either one more than the other. And if either one of us weren't to work out, the other one doesn't replace that connection or that emotional connection I had with the other person. They're completely separate connections, and I love them both equally.
I think more than anything else, you need to love yourself in order to love other people. Especially when there's more than one. For me,
absolutely. Absolutely. And, I did a lot of personal work last year
Mm.
in building my own self-esteem and confidence. And I think that has to do, like, that's made me a better partner overall. But I mean, if you ask either one of them, they'll say I'm probably the most stubborn, bossy person there is because, and I don't think that actually, but I think, like you said, loving yourself is so important. It doesn't mean that you're incapable of being loved if you don't love yourself, but it certainly helps you to love others more authentically and effectively.
That's great. And what are like the best things that you can think of? Like, if somebody is confused and is not happy in a monogamous relationship, but just think that, if they go out, then that might be cheating. What is like the best advice that you think that you can give them?
If they want to like pursue someone else like in a
Yeah.
cheating fashion,
Yeah.
okay, don't. Like, so if you are not having if you're not fulfilled or happy in the relationship that you have, then that's something that needs to be fixed in that relationship. And so to address those things first, because when you add another person into that equation, it kind of blows up in your face. It really does. So the issues that you had before will be magnified. So I would say if you are in love with that person, you want to pursue that relationship, fix that first and mend that. And then should you decide to want to add people in your life, let's talk about it. Because in polyamory, you can cheat. Like I can totally cheat on my partners. It's not just a free for all. And so I think just understanding that you have to have a solid foundation with yourself first and with your partner if you would like to open that up so that you don't destroy whatever you have with your current partner.
Like I've always had this question that if I'm in a relationship, how would I know that I will be okay for a polyamorous relationship with somebody else as well? Because, like sometimes you do look at other person and you then do find that other person attractive. You would like to talk to other people as well, but you just do not know whether this is the right way for you, or is it just now that you're just feeling maybe not wanted, or maybe, some certain feelings of yours are not being satisfied with your current
Sure.
partner? Like, how would you know that?
Well, I think I think it is a personal choice. And I don't think there's a right, like, I tend to think it's a spectrum. I tend to think that a lot of people find others attractive. And especially when our needs are getting met, we tend to think, oh, that looks good or that looks appealing. And I think one of the best things about polyamory is that I don't have to have my husband meet all of my needs. And that's the idea that if you're in a monogamous relationship, that person is to meet every need that you have. And that's just unreasonable. So with polyamory, there's not just multiple loving relationships. I also have a lot of deep friendships, a lot of deep emotional connections with people of different varied levels. And so that are more than just a basic friendship. And I think the best thing about that is that I can share those parts of me that Robert may not like, that Mark may not like, or not really love. And I can share those and still get that emotional needs, those emotional and connections and intellectual things met that I may not share with them. And so I think if you're thinking that you might be interested in that, research it, interview people, talk about it. And what's the harm in trying? If you and your partner are on board, try it. If you don't like it, you just didn't like it. It's okay.
Okay, this is something which I would love to know of. What do you think? Like, do you think marriage is important anymore?
That's a really funny question. So I think marriage has a lot of cultural implications that are deeply inbred within a lot of societies. It's across the board everywhere. Into the depths of the most recesses of the earth, people get married, which is kind of a weird phenomenon. The way I think of marriage is that I don't think it's as important as it once was. However, it still affords a lot of those legal protections that, not being married does not. So for that reason, I think in the society we live in, marriage is a very important thing. It gives you, benefits of death benefits of being able to have taxes together, all those things. But do I think that it's I don't believe that it's going to be a natural escalator going forward, because people are finding that they don't want the government as involved in their private lives. and that the marriage certificate itself does not make or break your relationship status. So it's really more of a social construct at this point. And I'm legally married to Robert, but they are, for all intents and purposes, both my husbands, or they're both my significant others. They are completely equal. So I do think that's probably going to be a huge shift going forward, because people are more learning kind of like what they want. And also marriage has a very, it's very focused on the man traditionally and historically. So you have a man, he decides to have to take a wife, and historically that's his property. Like you go from the husband, from the father's,
Family, husband's family.
absolutely. So it's a very anti-feminist idea in traditional marriage. So a lot of people are moving towards commitment ceremonies or exchanges. And I think that's something that's definitely happening in the alternative communities and the progressive communities, because of just what like the traditional marriage represents. But for me, I remember telling Robert after we deconverted, oh, I think we should get a divorce because marriage is an awful idea. And he's like, I don't think we're going to go that far. But, I don't typically share that I'm married or not in general circles, because I don't think it's really relevant.
So when you came out as polyamorous, how was, your family, how did they react? Were they okay with it? Or did they want to kill you? Or were they like, what's happening?
Okay, so it was a pretty big shift, because you have to remember that I was a very fundamental Christian prior to becoming an atheist. So I'm very fundamental Christian. So monogamy is deeply embedded in that society, in that culture. And then I became an atheist who's still pretty conservative, right? But I'm still a very conservative atheist. And then like over time, I just become more and more liberal and progressive, which is like a dirty word in Christianity. So that was a hard sell for my mother, who is a pastor, a very hard sell. So then when I decided to be a polyamorous, she about died. And so she just didn't understand it, and she didn't like it. And she tried every time to tell me to basically get rid of Mark and to focus on my marriage. There were times when she talked to my husband privately and said, you need to like get your wife in check for all intents and purposes. And of course my husband responded, you don't know your daughter. But it's just one of those things where that's something that's been really hard for her in her head to accept. But as time has gone on, like she's going to go see Mark and things like that. So I think it's developing as she's realized that this is not a phase and it's something that he's going to be in my life. So I want you in my life. And if you want to be in my life, you're going to have to get along at least. And so, but my dad and my stepmother are super just easygoing. And my stepmom's just like, are you happy? Okay, then I'm happy, So it's been a weird thing, because I know people have asked, wait, do you have two husbands? Like, what's going on here? Like, what's that? Are y'all, it was a lot of questions, and we just answered them honestly. And I think what's been really cool is seeing like Robert, my husband, answer questions, because like I'll get questions on my Facebook or from a family member, and he will actually take over and answer the questions. And so it's super cool to see that. But overall, everyone's been pretty accepting, except, aside from my mother, that's been kind of a hard part.
That's also something that must have taught you how to be a better mother to your kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So when I wanted to start Tickle.life, and since I'm Indian, so talking about sex is a big taboo. You just do not talk about sex. You don't even talk about sex, even if you're married. So when I do this, and I was like, oh my God, I'm telling my parents that, hey, listen, this is going to be something that I want to work on. I want to create an app where people can talk about sex. They can openly discuss, share. Their faces were like, what's happened? Like, what happened to our daughter? Like, why did we let her travel around? We should have she should have been married, and she should be like, staying in a room. So I do understand. But the interesting thing is, like, now parents are growing with us. So they're also getting to understand that the world is not that it was supposed to be. And these are just constructs which have been created by us.
Absolutely. And that's huge. I mean, I think I've learned a lot in how I want to treat my kids with dignity and help them to be the best version of themselves and to live their own life. And that's something that I think as each generation goes further, they learn a little bit more about allowing their kids to not be an extension of themselves, but to really be, their own person. So absolutely.
So I just have a last question before we
Yes.
end today.
Uh-huh.
Actually, before that question, I just thought I should discuss it with you. What do you think our next topic should be? Because today we did talk about it from a very generic point of view. It was more like,
Uh-huh.
you know, my education than anything else. What do you think, like, because you yourself went through this journey 11 months back. Like, what do you think is like, the next lesson for us in order to understand?
Sure. I don't, one thing I want to do, if you're willing, is I'd love to have my husband talk in on it, because
Oh, that will be great.
I think from a perspective of a partner who he is not polyamorous, like that's just not his thing. I love hearing his perspective of how it was for him and kind of his transition, but also just that it's complete. We're just completely normal, boring people. Like, it's not some crazy fetish that we get to, like, I would love just to see the ordinary side of like our lives and really any poly couple's lives, because I think sometimes it's such a taboo thing that you would have an open relationship or a polyamorous relationship. And I think just understanding that we're just people and we have, a deep connection to others. But I think that would be kind of a cool thing to see another person's side of it.
And I would love to meet him.
Cool.
Yeah, we should do that. So next one, let us do that. We need to find
Absolutely.
a husband. Yeah. So now my last question: Are you happier now than you were before?
Oh, you know, that is such an easy question for me. And I'll say because, I think I said a little bit, but I actually met Mark a long time ago and I was married and we were just friends, and that just wasn't a possibility for me to pursue at the time. So when I met Robert and he was open to me pursuing that, it's just like two of the people who make me the happiest, meaning like they bring out the most joy in me, having an opportunity to love them and to share our kids together and to live life. It's kind of the best thing ever. I'm absolutely happy. And I think the biggest thing I realize about happiness is that if I'm not happy in the situation I'm in, I always have the opportunity to change it. And I think I didn't feel that way prior. And that's not just polyamory, that's just really learning to embrace what you feel is right for you, sexually, relationally, vocationally, and all those things. So I'm absolutely happy now.
Thank you so much. It was lovely. And I hope to see you again, which we've already
Yes.
planned out. So, guys, thank you so much for hearing us. And please drop in any questions that you have because we will try to answer them. And if you have not downloaded the application, please go onto your iOS and download tickle.live, and you can ask n number of questions. You can talk to each other. You can share your experiences. We will wait for you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye, y'all.
Bye. Okay, it's done. Woo!
Good job.
But I love it. You know what? I was just smiling, and I love you. Can I say that?
Aw, likewise.
Yeah.
I'm really happy that we found each other. I was in the process of merging my blogs and trying to figure out what I want. So I just finally got them merged, and now we're going to launch a website. But I absolutely love that you talk about sex so freely, because even here in America, where we're like probably seen as the pariah of the world, it's just something that you don't talk about. And
Yeah.
so it's just, I know for me, I'm just sharing this now, but for me, my first marriage, we got married in a very traditional ceremony, and that relationship was so boring sexually because we were so afraid to do anything because it might be against God or it might be against people. And so we just went very unfulfilled for 5 years. And my husband now and I kind of started on that same track because we were very, very traditional. And I think about 2 years ago, we're just like, what are we doing? I mean, like there are lots of things that we can explore, and being able to talk freely to each other has really kind of just changed the way we relate. So it's been good. So I'm so glad you're doing this because we live in Texas where it's abstinence only. All schools only teach abstinence for birth control. That's the only education they get. So I'm really hoping that like this will be something that eventually younger people can also utilize because they need education,
It's so funny because I thought, oh, you know what, I'm going to get into an easier market. It might be easier to get people to talk about it. And then slowly and steadily, I can bring in India and different countries where we people are not taught anything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so different. People are not ready to talk. People are scared. People are just not like, you know what, we've got so many downloads, but people are not talking because they're just like, oh, it's not something right, or what will other people think, or oh, I'm a little scared. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
I'm sorry, I have to go on the phone, but we will talk soon.
yeah,
Thank you so much.
bye.
Bye, honey.